How's it going, everybody, and welcome to episode 282 of Master My Garden podcast. Now, this week's episode I'm looking forward to, and I'm chatting with Colin Jones. So, Colin was a speaker at Buds and Blossoms a couple of weeks ago and gave a brilliant presentation on creating a cutting garden or a cut flower garden from scratch and over the course of a season with some time pressures in it. But it was a brilliant presentation, a fabulous looking garden, what ended up being a beautiful space with some challenges along the way. But it's a great story, and it's going to be interesting to hear how someone can create, their own cutting garden at home. We spoke about it a little bit on the podcast before, but maybe we'll kind of delve into it from start to finish and what somebody might need to do and possible plants and so on. But that's not the only string to the bow. He's the head gardener in Salterbridge Gardens, which is a private garden, can open to groups and tours. He's a fantastic horticulturalist, has been on many, I suppose, plant finding trips around the world. We'll hear about some of those, and was formerly a gardener in Ansbrook Gardens. So yeah, look, there's loads to chat about. As I say, a fantastic gardener. Who I've known for a little while, but only recently spoke to him for the first time at, as I said, Buds and Blossoms. So, Colin, you're very, very welcome to Master My Garden podcast.
Thanks very much, John. Great to be here. I've been listening for a long time, so it's exciting to finally be on with you.
Yeah, there's loads of people that I've been trying to get on, and you've been on the radar for a long time, and yeah, we finally got to catch up, I suppose, at Buds and Blossoms a couple of weeks ago. So lovely to have you on at last. Loads we can talk about. There's a wide array of topics. I guess before we get into Salterbridge and the creating of a cutting garden, just a little bit about your horticultural sort of journey so far, and what has taken you from getting into gardening, horticulture to where you are today in head gardener in Salterbridge.
Okay, no bother. I suppose it goes back a long time. I remember my grandfather when I was 5 or 6. He used to grow. It was mostly fruit, I seem to recall. He grew, and then my father, he had a big fruit and veg patch back where I was growing up in the country as well. Now, conveniently for him, he worked offshore, so he was only there 2 weeks and then gone for another 2 weeks. So it was up to me to look after the rest of it, or a lot of it, me and my brother and sister. And then, from there, I developed a bit. I wouldn't say I disliked it, but it kind of fell out of me for a long time. Like, I went away and moved into Aberdeen, the nearest city to me. Ended up working security, things like that. My very first job when I left school actually was a landscaper, doing that for a summer, and then the season ended, and moved out of home, so I needed something to pay the rent. So kind of fell into security and ended up doing that for a few years, which I don't think that did me any favors. But after a while there, I kind of started thinking, what it is I want to do. So a local agricultural show, our horticultural college had a stand there. So my auntie happened to be there, and she got a flyer, gave it to me. I applied. I actually forgot to put a stamp on the envelope when I sent it off. So I'm very lucky that they paid the postage and accepted me onto the course anyway. So I'm up in the very northeast of Scotland and near Aberdeen, a wee town called Elgin. And this was about 5.5 hours southwest. Near anybody who's gotten the boat over to Scotland would probably sail to Stranraer. So it was about an hour north of there.
Yeah.
So I was there I did what was called the diploma back then. So it was a fairly basic course, and then a gap year working, which I did way up in the very north of Scotland, a place called the Castle of May. And then they got us back for another year, and I stayed on for another year to get my higher national diploma, it was called. So then from there, I bounced around a bit in Scotland, worked at a few private estates and things like that. And then I got offered a job, very luckily, at Ballyfin. I know a lot of people would probably know it in County Laois. They're a very exclusive hotel with a
Yeah.
fantastic garden there. And that was great. That was one of the things that really, was a defining moment. Like, 'cause I got to come over, and anybody who's been there will know that it's a fantastic garden, but also getting to work under a very well-known garden designer, Jim Reynolds, who was the MD at the time and had a great influence in the garden. So I worked there for a few years and then decided that I kind of needed to get a bit more experience. So again, bounced around a little bit here and there. And then I ended up at Duckett's Grove in County Carlow, I was there for I think 2 years, something like that. Yeah, so I was the project manager, developing the upper walled garden, which is where I first met Robert Miller of Altamont. And again, that was another great moment, getting to know Robert and seeing his passion and getting to he's a very good networker, Robert, as well. So getting to
Yeah.
know a load of people, as you know, Robert knows everybody, like, so it's great to get to know people through that. And Robert actually helped me as well when I applied for a job with the OPW at Ansgrove and Doneraile. So Ansgrove is a fantastic woodland garden, has an exceptional collection of rhododendrons and other woody plants as well. So they are I was lucky to work with gardening consultant Neil Porteous as well.
Oh
So I mean,
yeah.
that was again another huge influence. And through him, I met Seamus. I'd met Michael White, the curator at Mount Congreve, when I was working at Duckett's Grove. So I've been very lucky along the way to meet some people who've really sparked an enthusiasm and just this will for learning to kind of push you on the whole time. You always feel like somebody's just behind you, pushing you on the whole time, you know. So since then, I landed at Salterbridge here, and I've been here. I think it's just about 3.5 years. It is now. Yeah.
Yeah, a long journey in some respects, in that there's a lot of places there, a lot of gardens, a lot of very good gardens. And I'd actually, you did tell me, but I'd forgotten about Duckett's Grove. And Duckett's Grove, it's a really nice garden in Carlow. It's one that has, over the years, it got a lot of care for a period, then didn't seem to get much for a while, and now is getting a good bit of attention again. So I suspect that the walled garden and the borders there, you probably did a lot of early work on that, I would think, because when was it roughly you were there?
So I think the council acquired it around 2000, early 2000s anyway. And as you say,
Yeah.
they put a lot of money into it. They had Finola, I think it's Finola Reid, isn't it? The garden consultant. She was in an awful lot and doing a lot of work there. And they put an awful lot of money into it. And then the recession came in 2008. So obviously external, well, a lot of non-essential spending had to reduce down. So Duckett's Grove was on that. So they ripped out, it's a shame actually, they pulled out a lot of the good planting that she did and just put in like Viburnum Davidii. They put a load of camellias and rhododendrons in alkaline soil, so they weren't looking too well. And they never actually had anybody working there for a long time. So when I came in, it was a bit of like the bones of it were there, you know, and I didn't do anything structurally to the entire place. It was just I took out all the plants that were there, improved the soil, things like that, and kind of replanted. And Robert again was a huge help to me there. Like I maybe wasn't entirely ready to take on a project like that, but he's such a personable man that, you know, he was always at the end of the phone and willing to give a hand, and he
Yeah.
physically gave us a hand planting and things like that as well.
Yeah, I remember that because like I live not that far from there, and I actually remember years ago, um, I would have seen the changes in Duckett's Grove over the years. I remember
Mm.
I was doing one particular job outside the walls of Duckett's Grove for a man. He used to be the head porter in what's the big hotel in London, the biggest fancy hotel in London.
Savoy, is it?
Yeah, one of those. Yeah.
Yeah.
So he was the head porter there, and he had several encounters with all these famous people. But he was a brilliant. He was real small. I forget his name, but he was a real small little man, and he had robins trained at that time to come into his kitchen. So he used to open the door in the morning. I'd be outside doing some work for him, and then these robins would just fly into his kitchen, sit on the kitchen table for a few minutes, and go out again. But anyway, long story. But I used to be always in and out of Duckett's Grove, and I remember looking at it saying, "Oh, it's looking great now. There's work being done." And then there was a while where it wasn't, and it's good to see it now in good care again.
Yeah,
Um,
like I mean, to be fair to the council, since I left, they have taken on, you know, they've replaced me. I think that was the problem initially, was that there was somebody working there, and then when the recession came, I'm not sure what happened exactly, but whoever was in charge left, and they just never replaced them fully. You know, it was all done
yeah,
through CE schemes and things like that. So
yeah,
that
yeah.
need a bit of supervision and instruction as well.
Yeah. And then Ballyfin, yeah, that's a fantastic place, obviously. Vast gardens and gardens that need to feed into a five-star hotel as well. So it's an interesting place. You would have got lots of experience there, as you said as well. So yeah, again, I'd forgotten. You did tell me that when we spoke, but I'd kind of forgotten about that.
Yeah.
So the um journey continues anyway in Salterbridge, and it's a private garden as such, but you're there now for the last couple of years. Tell us a little bit about Salterbridge, tell us, what's happening there, what has happened there over the last couple of years, plans maybe for the future, and then obviously we get talking about what was your fantastic talk at Buds and Blossoms on creating the cutting garden.
Yeah, no bother. So, as I said, I started here. I think it was October 2021. Stephen and Helene, the owners, they bought the estate in August that year. So, I think one of the first things they did when they got here was decided they wanted an upgrade to the garden. The previous owners, the Wingfields, I think they'd been here. I don't think it was 100 years. It was maybe around 60, 70, 80 sort of years, and
Yeah,
they put in an awful lot of quite a lot of unusual trees and shrubs and that, but there was just acres of lawn underneath it that they cut. So after I was here for a couple of months and kind of had a walk around with Stephen and Helene, the owners, and said, look, I think it's got the perfect bones for a great woodland garden here. So how about we push down that avenue? So that's been kind of the main, I wouldn't say the main focus, but it's one part of the bigger project. So that's since I've been here, I've planted 16, I think it's about 1,600 trees and shrubs. A lot of them, about 400 of those are rhododendrons, I think. So I've got a great graph for rhododendrons. And then the plan with that area of the gardens, two big areas of the woodland garden. So the plan over time is we've cut paths into what was the lawns, and we're letting them grow as meadows. Over time, we want to kind of reduce the vigor of the grass. So this year we're going to look at maybe planting some yellow rattle and things like that. And then in a few spots, I actually have some of the woodland herbaceous perennials, so we have the existing big tree canopy. I've underplanted with an awful lot of smaller trees and shrubs, things like that. And then, we're mulching the whole time that we're here. So the area underneath is getting larger and larger. So the plan is to increase the herbaceous perennials under the trees and shrubs like that as well, and get some bulbs and things like that in there. So that's kind of, I wouldn't say the main focus, but it's one of the big areas that I spend a lot of time thinking about. On top of that as well, I think at the front of the house, we've developed two large herbaceous borders. Both that we've kind of pulled them up. They were awkward shaped and sizes, so we kind of expanded them so that we could get more in, emptied them out. And I planted, at the moment, they're looking fantastic out there. A lot
yeah,
of dahlias and geraniums and penstemons and sanguisorbas and things like that. So they're starting to sing and dance at this time of year. I've also done another two large, long herbaceous borders. I think they're both 2.5 meters wide there, thereabouts. And again, they've got different feels to them along the way. And then, as you said, we have the cutting garden as well, which was done last year. As well as last year, I did it's not quite a bowling green, but certainly a fine lawn, 300 square meters up there as well. So, and then another one for the future is we have a 2 acre walled garden that I need to put some thought into over the next point. And so we're not idle for long around here.
yeah. It sounds like it. Lots of projects. Does this feel like kind of the first garden that you're getting to really put your own influence on? Would that be fair to say? I
Yeah, it
know.
would be. It would be. I mean, when I was at Duckett's Grove, I was helpful for Robert's help. As I say, I was probably there a bit premature in my career. When I was at Anne's Grove, obviously Neil Porteous was the garden consultant there, and I wouldn't have known a great deal about woodland gardening either. So it was great to learn an awful lot off of him as well. But this is the first one where it's kind of, how would you say, I'm getting a lot of creative freedom. I certainly wouldn't say I can do what I want, not by a long stretch, but I can go to the owners and discuss. I'd like to maybe do a few things here, and it's the majority of the time it's welcomed, and it always improves the garden. So they're enthusiastic about the whole process as well.
Yeah. Yeah, it's nice. It's nice to have, somewhere that you can influence. Yeah, without having final say, as you say, the owners have that, but it is nice to have your own influence, and I suppose for you to be the main advisor on the project as opposed to following someone else's lead. So that's a nice step up.
Yeah. It is. I find it really rewarding to everything that we've done here. I was looking there the other day at some photos I took when I first started here in November. It always helps when the place looks dank and drab at the start anyway. But and then you skip back to how things are looking now, and like the turnaround is amazing. I find those kind of things really rewarding when you can
Yeah.
see. I always like to say that I've never left a place worse than when I've found it. I've always done improvements along the way.
Yeah, and that's good. And yeah, and as you say, nice to look back on those. You mentioned that, at some point in time, woodland gardening wouldn't have been wasn't your forte or your strongest point. But it sounds like now you have, I presume, following on from Mansgrove, that you've got developed that element of it, and you've talked about creating a biggish woodland area here. What kind of planting are we looking at? You did say you have 1,600 trees and shrubs.
Yeah,
Uh,
so as I said, majority of the ones that were here, the previous owners, they inherited a lot of legacy oak. So we have some fantastic large oak trees here with a load of the ferns, the polypodiums growing up along the branches and that. So I'll tell you how old they are. The previous owners, they planted quite a lot of acers, a lovely Enkianthus, a Sculis indica, the Indian chestnut, which is looking great at the moment as well. So since I've started again, like I mentioned, I've planted, I think probably around 400 rhododendrons. When I'm doing that, I try to kind of keep them in groups that I think look well. You have to, although it's a large area, I still think you have to have a design element to it. So you've got repetition
mhm.
down certain areas. I break things off into areas that are separate from each other, things like that. So what else? We have Philadelphus is flowering like mad at the moment down here. I actually cut out a few big ones down there, lots of budlias. I've started a good collection of hollies as well. There's a great range of hollies that you can get. I know Ravensburg up in Offaly, they produce an awful lot of them.
Okay. And go back to the Philadelphus there. I actually only mentioned it on the podcast last week. It's in flower at the moment, is it?
Yeah, 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 yeah.
Yeah. The smell is incredible.
I love them. Like I think that they're great plants. Them and the Deutzias, fantastic plants that are flowering at the moment as well. Colquitzia as well is another one which is flowering. All these sort of shrubs, they don't take up a huge amount of space. So yeah, I mean, we're blessed with having, I think, about 12 acres of woodland garden that we can play around with here. But in a small garden, I've seen these planted an awful lot in kind of small corners of the garden. They'll take quite a lot of shade and they kind of contain themselves and they'll just end up suckers every now and again. So you just keep a renewal program
Yeah.
to keep them flowering.
Yeah, no, there's some brilliant ones. I mentioned some of them last week, and it was interesting actually to see the comments.
Mm.
Some of them are definitely seen as old fashioned now, but there's some great flowering shrubs.
Oh yeah,
And
absolutely. Like a lot of the ones that are considered old-fashioned, Fatsias. When I was at college, Fatsia japonica was a car park plant. You
yeah,
buy them for. I remember seeing them in a garden centre for I think between 7 and 9 quid. And
yeah,
now because everybody's gone mad for the Schefflers or the Heptapleurums now, they're in the same family, Aureliaceae. So everybody's gone mad on them. You can't get them for less than about 20 quid now. It's
yeah,
it's
yeah.
funny how it swings and
Swings
roundabouts.
is right,
Like,
yeah.
yeah, I know.
Yeah, like and Fatsia is a brilliant one in containers as well. I've seen some people doing really brilliant things with containers and Fatsias
Yeah, I
recently.
just planted five. Helene, the owner, out in the road, we got an extension built, and they've put a patio around there. And she asked for five fatsias in containers around there. And again, like they're great. They're evergreen. They flower.
Yeah.
They're hardy out. They can take sun, shade, anything. They're bulletproof almost.
Yeah, and you can put your splash of color with your bedding or your whatever your perennials underneath it because they have that kind of canopy, but they don't block out. So they're brilliant for containers. Brilliant.
Absolutely brilliant. Yeah, yeah, 100%.
Yeah. So yes, that's the kind of the woodland garden. I know we haven't gone into it in any great detail, but as I said, the theme of your talk at Buds and Blossoms was the creation of this cutting garden. And I know there was maybe just give us sort of an overview of the story, and we might talk about some of the planting that you've used. It was literally from you were starting from scratch here with a deadline, I guess, of a wedding coming up. So it was
Yeah.
interesting. Yeah,
Yeah. So as I say, like anyone who was at the talk will see it was essentially a greenfield site, wasn't it? It was just
yeah,
a lawn. There was a couple of apple trees and a couple of buddleia in there. So I remember being in there on my interview and walking around with Stephen and Helene, and straight away we're kind of close to the N72 here. We're between Lismore and Cappoquin, so it's a busy road running between us. But then the house is kind of in front. It's blocking the way down to the road when you're in the cutting garden, and then we have a stable behind us, and there's a wall adjoining the two. So straight away you can feel the noise reduce, the wind drops down. It's a special little area in there. So I'd always had in my mind to kind of do something in that area. And beforehand it was just a bit of an awkward thoroughfare. There was a door in the wall, and that was about it. So yeah, I spoke to the owners after I'd been here a year or two, and I'd always said to them that would make a great area for, either a potager. It's close enough to the house for them if they wanted to do some vegetables or fruit or anything like that. Or the one I was always pushing was the cutting garden. It's something
Yeah.
I'd always, I wouldn't say always, but I certainly had intentions of doing something along those lines. And I love herbaceous planting. I find it's real reward and you get great value. So yeah, so once they agreed to that, we kind of started. I did quite a lot of designs. I went through them in the talk as well. So and I kind of explain a lot when you're doing designs in big areas like this. If you answer the basic infrastructure questions, then it does some of the design work for you, instead of just having this big blank page. If you can get a structure or the bones of a design onto a page, then it takes some of the pressure off and opens up other avenues as you go. So yeah, when was it now? It was the year before last. We actually started the work on it. I went down and pegged everything out and things like that. Sprayed off the grass, dug it off, and then I suppose it was just I probably could have got it all done realistically, and I would have liked to got it all done in the space of about 3-4 months. But there was issues with contractors letting me down or saying that they were going to do something and then never appearing or not doing the work or it wasn't quite right or things like that. So eventually I had to change the contractors and as you said, there was a deadline. There was one of the owner's sons was getting married on the estate here, and I wanted this to be like the focal point of the wedding. So I remember Neil Porteous was saying to me, "Oh, you need to meet a deadline as a plan and not enough time." So that's one that always sticks with me. So I'm a nightmare for writing down lists the whole time and trying to make everything work and numbering and getting it all in order and that. Like, so it was going through that, and then eventually, we did get the hard landscaping side of things organized, and then the planting. Yeah, the planting was great. Like I really enjoyed doing a huge area like that. Dahlias, we planted. I think we had 28 varieties of dahlia. What else? Loads of salvias I put in as well. That Nachtflinder. What's the other one? Hot lips is another one as well. So yeah, it was good. I had a chat with the owners about the color scheme. So again, that's another decision taken out of my hand. I find the more decisions you can get somebody else to make, the easier your life becomes.
Yeah.
So like I said in the talk as well, one thing that I consciously made an effort with was reduce the number of varieties that I grew in there. A lot of stuff I've designed before, it just looks like somebody got a bag of Smarties and threw them on the table. There's no rhyme or reason to it. So it's sometimes better to, instead of going through the catalog and, oh, I like that, I like that, I like that. Go through and mark all the ones that you like, and then mark a couple that you really, really, really like. And like, I think I was planting 65, 70 of that Verbena Bampton, so straight away that's a character plant of that area.
Yeah, and that was one major feature of your talk was Verbena Bampton in full flower and the concept of it drawing you up along the pathways and it worked really brilliantly.
Yeah.
You mentioned something there at the start, just in relation to how the structure sort of can do the design for you if you allow for what you need to put in there. And I guess in this scenario, what you're talking about was there was the one opening and you wanted to create kind of walkways through it and they were the original, I suppose, forming of what were the beds, and you had to offset them because they weren't symmetrical as such.
Yeah.
Um, but that's a good tip for people at home as well if they're looking to create something like a cutting garden. Is there an area that you're trying to lead somebody through, get your pats in there, and have that as the step one of creating, or where you create your cutting garden, I guess, is it?
Yeah, yeah, absolutely. I mean, like again, we're very blessed here to have space and things like that. But in a smaller garden, you could just section off an area and go, right, that's where I'm going to produce cut flowers, and put the infrastructure in, get all of the hard work done first. Not the hard work, but the stuff which would disturb it, because there's no point putting down beds and then having to dig them up to put back down paths and then put your beds back down over them.
Mm,
So it's if you can get a good plan that you're happy with and stick to that, then you know the direction you're going in. So it just makes your life a bit easier.
yeah, for sure. You mentioned Verbena Bampton. There was also one or two other sort of hero plants that you mentioned during your talk. Can you just give us a lift? I know you said, was there 20 something varieties of dahlias? So
28 varieties of dahlia,
28.
yeah.
Wow.
So we've put in a few more this year as well, just as an experiment. It's just a great thing about herbaceous plant is you can play around with it the whole time. So yeah, Verbena Bampton, we had quite a lot of geraniums in there as well. Geranium, this Silestemon, I think, it's already in flower now. It's looking fantastic at this time of year. So it's a species. It's very strong. Again, like the Bampton, it kind of falls out onto the path. That's the style I love. This kind of full to
Yeah.
burst and feel to the beds. What else was there as well? Now, the Pheopsis, the small little pinhead pink flower. That actually looks exactly like what we call sticky willies in Scotland, cleavers. I think over here
Oh,
they
yeah. Yeah.
look
Yeah.
like that in flower, in leaf. Sorry, but they've got these lovely little pom pom shaped, tiny little, about the size of a golf ball, and it's absolutely covered in them. The pollinators absolutely adore it as well. Like I mentioned, the dahlias, I think the best one, it's actually in flower now. I cut one yesterday, is one called Salmon Runner.
Oh,
And
yeah.
like I said, as a cutting garden, you have to think about how these plants perform as cut flowers. Like, and the stem on this one it's over a foot long, and is it's like a bit of iron in your hand. You can swing your hand around, and this
Yeah.
thing doesn't
Perfect.
bend at all. It's fantastic as a cut flower.
Yeah. Yeah.
Plus we had quite a lot of roses we planted in. Stephen, he likes roses, so I went up to Robert and got quite a lot. I think Gertrude Jekyll is probably one of the best ones.
It's a brilliant rose, isn't it?
Yeah, absolutely love it. Or actually, I'm growing one because it's a big area. I'm actually growing one called Blush Noisette, which is technically a climber, but I'm growing it as a shrub, just
Okay.
in the back of a border. So it's fairly vigorous, but if it leans down on the shoulder of another plant, I'm not too bothered. Like it's kind of up the back and out of the way.
I don't know that now. Color wise, what color is it?
Kind of very, very pale pink. It's kind of semi-double flower on it. Yeah, it's just a real nice one. Like it's worth looking up.
Yeah, brilliant. Just going off track here, you mentioned during your talk that at one point in time there was a contractor to put in pats, and you were going away on a sort of a plant finding trip with some of your other horticultural buddies, and the plan was when you came back, all these pats were to be done, and they weren't. But just to hone in on the kind of plant finding trip, or I know you've done a few of these. So where did you go? What did you find? What was anything?
Yeah. So yeah, the one last year was Southwest China, a region called Yunnan. So anybody who knows any plants Yunnanensis, you have the rhododendron Yunnanensis. There's a lot of stuff named Yunnanensis. What's the other one? The name's gone out of my head, but Yunnanensis obviously refers to Yunnan. So it's in the southwest of China. We were in an area that bordered Tibet. We went over for just under 3 weeks, and it was great. Like this is the third trip that I'd been on similar to this before that. So we went to the very eastern edge of the Himalayas that time, and I think 3 years ago I went to the very western end of the Himalayas in northwest India, where it borders Afghanistan, a place called Ladakh. But Yunnan, it was fantastic, like because when we were in Ladakh, it was very high altitude desert plants we were looking at, so there wasn't a
Okay.
great deal I think there was a rose there, Rosa Webbiana, that we saw an awful lot of, and I know Seamus up in Kilmacurra grows that. But other than that, we didn't see anything really transferable. Whereas as soon as we landed into Lijiang, as the city we went into, like straight away, as soon as we drove out of there, you're seeing viburnums, you're seeing rhododendrons galore, pinuses,
Yeah.
loads and loads of stuff. So it's just, I find it just, it's awe-inspiring to go out into nature and see these plants that you're used to seeing in gardens and in their natural habitat, and how they behave and interact with each other, I think is where I get a real buzz out of it, you know?
Yeah, and is this, when you go to these places, is it to see what could translate back here, or is it just, from a horticultural interest that you like to see these in their natural habitats, or what's the kind of the drive here?
Yeah, a bit of both. Like travel as well is a great love of mine. So it kind of mixes them together, like But certainly in the DAC and parts of the trip to China, we actually went over what's called the Dokar La, which was over 4,000 meters, and we actually stepped foot into Tibet. So at those kind of altitudes, you're not really seeing a great deal that's going to be you're able to grow here because it's really, really sharply drained. But on the way up there, we went through different vegetative layers all the way up, so we started
Yeah.
the kind of subtropical up to the temperate and then up to the alpine and then to the very high alpine stuff. So I mean, we saw an awful lot of things. Since I got back, I ordered a few of the rhododendrons that we saw. There are some sanguiniums. I'm keeping an eye out for a few more. So yeah, and going back to things that you see, one thing that I saw there that I fell in love with an awful lot of was the Thalictrum delevii growing next to Hypericum forestii. And when they're in flower together, I thought that was one of the nicest plant combinations you'll ever see. So
Yeah.
one thing I've actually ordered some. I planted a load of Hypericum there last year, and I just got hold of some Thalictrum earlier this year. So I'm just going to intermingle them, and that's exactly how it was in Yunnan. So you
Yeah.
can transfer these things into it. And I have a few pictures of looking up over to the Dokar La, and there was rhododendron, wardii, rhododendron primuliflorum, sanguinium, and then Virginias in there. And I think there was a Mechanopsis as well. This complete,
Mm.
just it was it was great. Like I absolutely loved it. But you can almost pick and choose any combination within that, and it would work.
Yeah, yeah, yeah. Yeah, nice to like to take a photograph like that to then transfer it. Okay, it's not exactly the same, but to try and transfer it across here and replicate it using something that you've seen, I suppose, in the wild out there. So it's
Yeah,
incredible.
yeah,
And
and even on a more basic level as well. It's not even just the combinations, but I mean, Beth Chatto was a great proponent of right plant and right place. So if you can go to where a plant originates from and see what it's growing, how it's growing,
yeah.
then you have a better understanding of it straight away, what kind of conditions it needs.
Yeah, yeah. What you'll need to do then to make it work.
Exactly, yeah.
Yeah, for sure. Any future trips planned or?
Not at the moment. No, we have an 8-month-old at home, so
Oh
all
yeah,
the current travel
that.
plans are further than Waterford City or need to be bypassed. No, nothing. I have a few bubbling away in the background. I'd like to kind of push on, maybe in a year or so's time, but nothing too pressing at the moment. Anyway.
Yeah, yeah. Well, 8-year-olds will keep you close to base for a while, and for
Yeah,
sure,
yeah,
or
yeah.
8-month-olds, should I say? So in terms of Salterbridge going over the next couple of years, so you've mentioned some of the things that you're working on. What is there kind of plans in place over the next kind of 12 months, 18 months that are ongoing? I know the cutting garden was sort of the last big project, but what's on the cards over the next little while?
Well, we're putting in a lake.
Oh wow.
So no, I'm entirely stepping back from the contractor side of things, and then the contractor here is going to do all the actual physical digging work and stuff. But I mean, I'm going to have a huge lake that'll need planting up
Wow.
relatively soon. So that's going to be really great fun. I think, this is one thing that the estate is missing is water, running water
Yeah.
going through. So that's going to be great fun doing that. Other than that, what was the other thing? Oh yeah, up in the walled garden, I think I'm going to start focusing a little bit more on as well. Your talk was very good as well, John, about growing fruit and veg. I always, because I'm from an ornamental background, I always put fruit and veg at the very bottom of my priorities, if I'm perfectly honest with you. So it's kind of giving me a bit of a kick to kind of knock it higher up on the list of priorities. So I'm dedicating a day or so a week to kind of spending a bit of time. We do have quite a big veg patch up above in the walled garden, so that's something I'm looking to maybe expand and even start an orchard up there as well as on the cards. And the fruit cage, I think we're going to upgrade hopefully over the autumn into the winter as well, so that next year now we can get
Yeah.
going with a proper setup there.
Yeah, it's funny. The ornamental garden, from my point of view, probably gets put on the back burner because again, limited time, and I just do what works for me, which is at the moment just growing fruit and vegetables.
Yeah,
Um, obviously have a huge interest in the ornamental side, but not to the same detail in terms of plants. The names of plants I kind of don't focus too much on. It's how it looks. But again, over time, I'd like to have more time to focus on that part of it. But again, small children like yourself, you just focus on what you can at this point in time. But yeah,
yeah, I'm focusing on that at the moment because I'm paid to be here. Our own garden at home is taking a severe backseat. It's the very bottom of every priority at the moment.
yeah. Well, that was a question, but I think we'll skip on past that then. If it's no, we get into it anyway. So just your own garden then. What, like, obviously time wise, small children, uh, day job is gardening. It's probably hard enough to reach on your own garden. Or what do you do at home? What have you? You're probably collecting plants, I guess. Anyway.
I'd probably the plants I collect or get or propagate or stuff. I actually put them all back into the garden. I usually do that sort of stuff to give away as gifts.
Hmm.
I know Mike White at Mount Congreve is the one who installed that kind of thought process into me. If you can give somebody a plant, you have a connection straight away. There's two gardens have made a connection, and two people as well through that one plant. And also, it's the best way to keep a plant is if you give it away.
Hmm.
If your one dies, then you can always go back and get cuttings or divisions off of that one.
Yeah.
But going back to our own garden, when we first started there, it was just myself and my wife and dog. So I put in quite I wouldn't say huge, but a big enough herbaceous, and I do have a few bits and pieces that I put into it. So it was kind of broken into two sides, and then we have a big lawn in there as well, and. Yeah, I suppose it's very a wee bit tough because like never mind our child like but when I got it all planted up and we had a great maybe 3-4 months out of it, but we're absolutely plagued with deer around here.
Oh,
And so we fenced off the main garden up here around the main house, which is grand, but now they're coming down to ours for their dinner, so
right. Yeah.
the enthusiasm for it kind of wanes a little bit when, as you
Yeah.
said,
Yeah.
you're up here working all day, you go home, you break your back for another few hours, and then a deer hops over the fence and just starts munching on your Annabelles. It kind of
Yeah.
the
Yeah.
impetus to drive on with it has gone a little bit. So I know I got a Saturday there a while ago, and I did kind of start getting back into it a wee bit. So I think that we're going to look at maybe putting some of the chestnut paling fence around it or something to try and keep the deer out a wee bit and keep Bonnie, our daughter, in as well. So it's a double
Yeah.
effect. So yeah, it's just at the moment it is a bit hard if I'm honest, like, and when I say hard, I mean impossible to get out there and do stuff, because by the
Yeah.
time you sit down, it's almost 8 o'clock, and the last thing you want to do is get back
Yeah.
into your work gear and go back outside and pull
Yeah,
weeds.
no, for sure. It's when you're small children, as I say, that's the case here.
Yeah.
The garden definitely gets put on the back burner, and I just do the essentials. And I suppose it's no different than a lot of people, at this stage, I suppose. And hopefully over time, you'll get the time to focus on your own. You
Well, the
mentioned a
plan is
few.
to get her out weeding it, like.
Yeah, well, that's a good start. That's a good start.
That's how you kill any enthusiasm for gardening
Yeah.
with a kid, isn't it?
Yeah. You mentioned a couple of things there that are interesting. You mentioned at the very, very start, you mentioned that your granddad was, quite a good gardener. You mentioned fruit. It's strange because Well, it's not strange. It's very obvious when you take it in the context of just the last couple of minutes of our conversation. Loads of people that I've had on the podcast over the last few years have got their garden inspiration from their grandparents. And I guess I'd never thought about it this way, but I guess the last conversation we just had, where as a parent you just don't have the time for it necessarily in the early stages, and it's not until later on that somebody gets the time. But it is a brilliant connection, is that connection to grandparents through gardening. It seems to be a thread that is with a lot of horticultural people that come on the podcasts. So that
Yeah,
was interesting, and also what you mentioned about gifting plants, especially plants that you propagated yourself. And again, that thread has always been all the time through the podcast, where plants are linked back to grandparents' gardens or parents' gardens. And as you said, it's a brilliant gift because it keeps that connection both between the gardens and the people that will last, after somebody has passed on or whatever. So yeah,
yeah, for sure.
that's
Going back to the grandparents and parents, I think that if my dad told me to weed, it was a chore, whereas if my granddad did it, it was a bit of crack, you know?
yeah, yeah. It's amazing. A bit of context, a bit of space between it is good. Yeah. You mentioned your dad then as well. You were saying he would be 2 weeks on, 2 weeks off. Was he on the oil rigs? Just out of
Yeah, yeah,
pure
he was working on it. To be honest with you, the veg patch was a wee bit of an afterthought. I think when they bought the house, they had a veg patch, and he kind of grudgingly brought it forward and kept,
yeah, yeah.
out of stubbornness more than anything, kept it going. But I do remember he had, God, do you remember those old orange rotavators?
Oh yeah,
Crap things.
the big Howards.
Yeah, yeah, it was about 7 or 8. You were getting thrown around this cage with one of them. Like,
Yeah,
it
those
was very
things.
fun at the time, but and he had a 1947 Massey Ferguson tractor as well. Like, so it's always
Yeah,
playing around with that sort of stuff. The machine.
those Howards. I've a real bad memory of those Howards. The very first one that I ever come across, I was in a garden and I was asked to start it, and it had one of the winder starters on it. And I had never used one before. I would have seen things wound up to be started, but this one, the way they're supposed on the handle, they're supposed to have a sleeve that turns, so
Yeah,
that
yeah,
when it kicks back, the sleeve turns in your hand and not the actual handle. But the
yeah.
sleeve was gone off it, and I gave it a good wind, and then it kicked back, and it wrenched
Ugh,
all the skin off the palm of my hand. That
jeez.
was my very first memory of those Howard rotavators. Yeah,
Well, I'm a gardener, but the reason my brother isn't is my dad rigged up some device to one of our lawnmowers where you started it with a drill. He put a socket on the top of it, so that meant that there was a bolt spinning around on the top of this thing
yeah.
in the garden. My brother ripped his hand to pieces
Oh
when he
no.
was doing that one day. Like, so yeah, luckily I dodged that one and carried on gardening.
Yeah, for sure. Your current role, obviously, it's exciting. You have, as we said, you have that bit of autonomy to sort of put your own stamp on things to a certain extent, or bring your own ideas forward, to be approved or otherwise. And yeah, it's nice to have, that sort of autonomy. The gardens themselves, they're not open gardens per se, but I know that you can kind of open by appointment and various things. So maybe tell us a little bit about that.
Yeah, absolutely. Certainly this year we've been, I wouldn't say busy with tours or anything like that, but we've had more in this year than we have since I started here. So, well, I would say, like you said, it's open for groups and tours. I'd say a minimum 15 people to get in, really. But yeah, by appointment, my email address, I'm sure you can put it in
I
the
put in
link
the
at the
show notes,
bottom
yeah,
there
for
if you
sure.
want.
Yeah,
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 and just get in touch and look, we can arrange something. But I would like it depends on your interest, to be honest. Like, there's an awful lot here to see, so you won't see it all in one shot. So if you wanted to come in the spring, early spring, see the magnolias, come in the late spring and see the rhododendrons, and then the cotton garden from kind of now on. Like, I was up there today. It's looking really well at the minute, and it's only
yeah,
going to get better.
yeah, for sure. And I know you're doing some talks. You've done obviously Buds and Blossoms. You recently, or not too long ago, did one for Robert down in Altamount.
Yeah.
Any more on the horizon that people should look out for?
I am doing one in Lismore Centre. When is it now? September, I think it is. Colin. They do an autumn program of talks, like, but that's going to be on the trip to Yunnan. So that's I think that's the only other one I have lined up. I think the Waterford Garden Plant Society were here at the weekend. They've asked me to do a talk for them next year at some point. But yeah, if
Yeah.
anybody does want to talk, just let me know again.
Yeah, for sure. And for anyone that wasn't at Buds and Blossoms, yeah, it was a fantastic talk to actually see the journey from, as you said, greenfield site to full cutting garden, and then the mention of all the really good cutting plants that were in there, cut flower plants that were in there, was, it was really good to see that transformation. So yeah, it was a brilliant talk on the day, and yeah, today has been really interesting episode. And thank you very much for coming on Master My Garden podcast.
Thanks for having me, John. It's a pleasure.
So that's been this week's episode. A huge thanks to Colin for coming on. As I said, the talk at Buds and Blossoms was fascinating. I know it's a talk that he's delivered before, I think maybe for RHSI in the past, but keep an eye out because I'm sure it will come up again. There's some brilliant plant choices in it, some that I wouldn't have necessarily thought of, some that I wouldn't have come across before as well, but all of them suitable for cut flowers. So if you are thinking of creating a cut flower garden, definitely that's worth checking out. If you do have gardening groups, I know that a lot of gardening clubs listen to the podcast. Any of you guys want to visit Salterbridge, just contact Colin. I'll put the email in the show notes. Just send an email and let them know the details, and I'm sure it'll be a garden well worth seeing. And that's been this week's episode. Thanks for listening, and until the next time, happy gardening.